Thank you, Janet. I have loved having you all participate in more of worship. The less of me there is and the more of you, I love that. So thank you for those of you who are serving. Thank you for those of you who support those who are serving in all of the different ways. It is great to be a part of this community of believers. Today, we are going to dive in, continue with our Difficult People series. And I guess today, and each week, we've been talking about how difficult it is to be in life with people because people are messy. But really what we've been talking about is what we can do with ourselves. Because the reality is that we cannot change other people. We can only change ourselves. So at each thing that we're looking at, I guess I kind of tricked you. Maybe I made you think I was going to tell you how to fix all the people in your life. Well, if that's true, I lied. What we're really looking at is how to work on ourselves so that we can better interact with the world and so that we can be at peace as we live in this world. And today we're going to talk about envy. And this week has been a challenging week, digging into and understanding Scripture and the world and as God relates to us and as we relate to others in terms of envy. I read a story as I was preparing for this week of a 15-year-old girl. Now, she was a troubled child. She had a life that was very difficult. But all that being said, one day she was with her cousin, and out of a fit of envy, she stabbed her cousin 40 times. She's 15 years old. And what she expressed later was that she was just upset that she had all of this technology and specifically some shoes that she had wanted. And I know it's a very stark example of envy, but I wanted to put us on course to understand how dangerous envy is. Because as James says here, that any envy and selfish ambition, there comes disorder and wickedness of every kind. Wickedness of every kind. Wanting something that somebody else has leads to the propensity to do some really terrible things or to behave terribly, even though we think it's just an internal battle that we have with ourselves. Now, this poor girl's example of her life turning because of a moment of envy is actually something that you see happen a lot in Scripture. If you look at Cain and Abel, Cain murdered his brother because he was envious of God's response to his brother's offering. Then we have talked about here in church together, Jacob and Esau, and how as brothers, they fought for standing with their parents and in this world, and they were envious of each other. And then today we're going to talk about Joseph, probably one of the best examples of envy gone wrong in Scripture. Joseph was the son of Jacob, and Jacob loved Joseph the most of all of his children, which is interesting because Jacob's parents liked him the best of all of the children. Do you see how the family drama goes from one generation to the next, even thousands of years ago? And Jacob loved Joseph the most, and he loved him so much that he made him a tunic. Now, in our world, we've turned it into the amazing Technicolor dream coat that Joseph had, right? There's plays on it, there's been movies on it. But it's a part of Scripture, it's a part of our history, that when this coat was given to Joseph, Joseph's brothers were terribly envious. And they hated Joseph because of their father's love for him. They hated him so much, they were so envious that they plotted to kill him. Now, one of the brothers, Reuben, was a little bit more mature, a little bit more wise, talked them into not killing him, just pretending that he had been killed. They threw Joseph in a well. They sold Joseph into slavery. And then they made it look like Joseph had been killed by taking that coat that his father had given him, smearing it with animal's blood, and then taking it to the father and saying, "Your son has died." This, my friends, is a perfect example of how far things can go when we don't tame that envious piece inside of us. Listen, we better answer that phone. I'm telling you right now. Is it me? Is it my phone? Mildred. Hey, put it on and I'll talk to him. And I'll say, listen, Joseph said, I'm kidding. I've done that myself 1,000 times. So what are we supposed to learn? What does Scripture say to us? We see examples in Scripture of envy turning bad time and time again. Proverbs talks about envy multiple times. We see examples of the disciples being envious of each other and wanting specific position with Jesus. So I thought we should look at the core of what envy is, and then maybe look at some things that we can do to protect ourselves, to guard ourselves from this propensity to feel envy towards others in this world. Envy is defined by the dictionary as a feeling of discontent or resentful longing that is caused by somebody else's possessions or qualities or luck. And so as a kid, you might be envious of the kid next door who got the new iPhone, whatever we're up to now, because he has something that you don't have. As an adult, you may be envious of your neighbor who has the current iPhone, whatever it is now, because you don't have what they have. We are envious of possessions. We are envious of others' personal body looks. We're envious of people's ambition or their success. We can be envious of how smart somebody is that we don't think that we are. But we all have this propensity to want something that we don't have, that we see that others have. And it changes us on the inside when we give in to that desire, or when we sit in that desire instead of speaking back to that desire in our heart. Now, as I thought about it and as I studied, I really think that the root of all envy is comparison. Because without comparison, we don't really know that somebody has something that we don't have, or we don't really know that somebody is something that we don't think that we are. And comparison is a natural part of a growing human's process. Children, babies, at the very youngest of ages, learn how to distinguish people by comparing them. Babies know their parents' faces because they've seen a stranger's face, and they see what's different and what's the same. And as they grow, they learn about the world. We learn about the world by comparing things. This is a door because a door has these attributes, where a chair has these attributes. We learn about the world around us by comparing the similarities and the differences. And then we put labels on them. We say a door is defined by this many things, and we label it a door. And a chair is defined by these things, and we label it a chair. We say blonde hair is defined by these characteristics, and we label it blonde. Brown hair is defined by these characteristics, and we label it brown. It's a natural part of growing. It's a natural part of our species. It's how we learn to engage in this world. Where it goes wrong, however, is when we put value judgments on those characteristics. Where we go wrong is when we say blonde is made up of these characteristics and brown is made up of these characteristics, but blonde is better. Or we say height is how far you are from your foot to, in the air. And being tall as a man, that's good. And being short as a man, that's not so good. We place value judgments on our noticing of similarities and differences. And we don't necessarily intend to do this. In fact, most of the value judgments that we put on things, we've learned simply by the environment that we live in. If you grow up in today's society, you learn that if you have electronics, an iPad, a phone, a computer, a gaming system, that's a good thing. And if you don't have those things, then you're less than for some reason. Now, some people don't have them because their parents have intentionally made a decision not to allow them to have them. Others don't have them because they can't afford them. Regardless of the reason why you don't have them, if you don't have them, you're not as cool as the other kids. We learn that certain types of shoes, I remember when I was growing up, the Air Jordans were the shoes that you had to have if you wanted to be cool. I never had Air Jordans. I was never Air anything. And I was not very cool. And that was, actually at the time I didn't think it was okay. Right now I'm all right with it. But back then there were things I didn't have that would have made me cool that I didn't have. These value judgments we learn as we grow. And some of them are different. Like I said earlier, lived in California. There was no value judgment placed on me if I didn't root for a certain football team. None whatsoever. And in fact, if I had rooted for a football team, they probably would have judged me as crazy because who cares about football? Nobody in California. But here, friends will get in real fights about which team they follow. And you are less of a citizen if you are not a such and such fan. And I will not fill in blank. I'll let you fill it in. I know who you don't like. I've learned over the years what the real rivalries are. But our society, where we grow up, our families, our contexts, tell us what's good, what's bad, what's better, what's okay, what makes us cool, what makes us not cool. I mean, you go to any newsstand in the grocery line, and there's going to be about at least 10 magazines that tell you how to lose 10 pounds in 10 days. And that's because losing 10 pounds is a good thing, because being skinny is a good thing. And then there's going to be ones that tell you how to grow hair, because you've lost all your hair, in 3 days. Because having hair is good and not having hair is not good. That's what society tells us just by marketing alone. That's not a friend telling us that. That's people selling products. But they convince us that this is the right way and this isn't right. And as much as smart as we think we are, as educated as we think we might be, those messages still get in. So that when we are looking around the world, when we are looking at the world around us at church on Sunday, or if we're out and about, when we see people and we see differences, we make value judgments based on those differences. So today, you might walk into Starbucks and see somebody with really big things in their ears that make their ear, lobe really huge. And in your mind, you think, oh, God. Right? Because in your mind, that's not good. We've placed a value judgment on somebody's difference. And this is where envy comes in. Because once those value judgments are placed and we buy into them, then when we look around and we see differences, we see people who have something that's judged as better than what we are, we become envious. We want what it is that we don't have. And it can be small things, like gutters that work. Or it can be really big things, like house or being able to feed your family. It's a righteous need, but it doesn't mean that we get to be envious of somebody who has what we don't have. Sometimes we feel like people have things that we are due and that they haven't earned. I've worked hard my whole life, we might say to ourselves. And that guy, I know he hasn't done diddly. And look at him. Look at how successful he is. That's not fair. Now, I learned from a preacher a long time ago that fairness ended in the Garden of Good and Evil, right? Fairness ended with Adam and Eve. I tell that to my kids all the time, but it doesn't stop me from thinking every once in a while, that's not fair. So envy is a natural feeling. Comparison is a natural thing. Value judgments, on the other hand, are learned behavior that we can change. We can decide not to buy into the value judgments that are taught to us. But that's hard. It's really hard because those value judgments are pushed at you every day. Anytime you're engaging in this world, somebody's telling you that something is good and something else is bad. And it takes a lot of work on our part to put those two things apart. And when we become envious, one of the things that starts to happen is we'll have internal narratives that start running in our mind. We might start thinking, well, I can't go to that party today because if I go to that party today, I don't have the right clothes for it. And I know that everyone will see me in the wrong clothes, and they will think that I don't belong there. They will think that I shouldn't be where I am. We start to create stories of the way other people will think of us because of what we have or what we don't have. Now, those things may happen, but more often than not, the internal narratives that we have going through our mind are not the ways that people actually think or look at us. People that we think poorly of us may not even think of us at all. Yet because we have this envious position inside our heart, which I don't even think many of us realize is there. Envy is a croucher. It doesn't really pop up as a ding, ding, ding that often. It's this insidious little underlying current that kind of just sits in the back of your head and says things over you. Things like, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You don't eat well enough. Or everyone out there is against me. These things that speak over us that aren't necessarily true. And the heart of this comparison, when we exercise this right to compare and then to judge and to feel envy, what we're left with is discontentment. In the definition for envy was the word discontent. And part of envy is the fact that we are not happy, we are not satisfied with whatever it is that we have or whoever it is that we are. And so at the base of envy, besides comparison, is the inability to be satisfied with whatever it is that we've been gifted with right now in our lives. We stop seeing the beauty and the gifts that we already have, and we focus on all of the stuff that we don't have. In Philippians 4:10 through 13, Paul, who is sitting in jail as he writes this, Paul, the Apostle Paul, who has been beaten for Christ, who has been drugged to the lowest levels of life because of his willingness to follow Jesus. He writes this. He says, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. The most important word, I believe, that was spoken by Paul in that paragraph is the word learned. Contentment is not a natural thing for human beings. Envy is natural. Comparison is natural. Contentment, on the other hand, is a learned behavior. It is something we have to choose for ourselves in any situation. We must learn to be grateful for what we have, no matter where we are. Because there's some seasons of life that are going to be bountiful and beautiful for you. There's some seasons of life that are going to be easier than others. And then there's going to be some seasons of life that are difficult and they are hard and you don't have a lot. You really don't. It's not just an envy comparison thing. But whatever our circumstance, the way that we have joy and contentment and peace is by choosing joy, contentment, and peace. When we envy, when we allow ourselves to sit in that mindset of wanting something that we don't have, we are saying to God, whether or not we are saying it out loud, that we aren't happy with what He's given us. We are saying that what He has given us is not enough. We are saying that the way that He has provided for us in this season of our life is not enough. But what God calls us to is the understanding that whatever it is that we have is enough for us right now, and He will take care of the rest. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't work. And this doesn't mean that we don't give effort in our lives. It doesn't mean that we don't try and follow God with all of our hearts. What it does mean is that we don't try and follow anything else with all of our hearts. Our job solely in life is to follow God and where He leads us with all that we have, and to trust Him with the rest, being happy with whatever it is that we have in this moment in time. At the end, Paul ends with, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And a few of the commentaries that I read this week really surprised me. Because I've said this verse before, I've read this verse before, I've spoken over it in my life before, but I have never read it in the context of this scripture, understanding that what Paul is specifically talking about is Jesus' ability to help him be content in any situation. Specifically, Paul is saying he can be content. He has learned to be content because of Jesus' participation in his life and his surrender to Jesus and his leaning on Jesus. Paul can do that specifically because of Jesus, because he is surrendering all of those things that he would like to have happen instead, and being content and satisfied with whatever it is that he has at this moment in his life. The worry that we have over material things in our life show a very low understanding of God's love for us. When we want more than what we have, we're saying we want more than what God's given us, and what God's given us ultimately is His love. And His love is sufficient. And this world wants to tell us every day that we need more. We need more money, we need more stuff, we need more looks, we need more smarts, we need more. But really, the only thing we need more of is God. And I know that's such a preacherly thing to say. I get it. It's a platitude. It's this thing that, of course, she says that. But I have just a hard time living it as everybody else does. Because you have to choose it. You have to choose to believe that. You have to choose to speak that into your life when that envy starts to pop up in your head. You have to choose to understand that whatever it is that you have is enough. And so my challenge for us this week is to start being grateful intentionally. Now, every day when I pray, I say thank you to God for something or some things. But my goal this week for me, and maybe you want to join me in this, is to start a gratitude journal. Lots of people do this in Thanksgiving because that's the thankfulness month. Well, we should make every month the thankfulness month. And every day I'm going to sit down and I'm going to try and do this with my family, and we're going to look at what we're thankful for and we're going to write it down. And we're going to go beyond the sunshine, and we're going to go beyond, I say thank you about my bed every night because I really like my bed. But I'm going to go beyond thanking Him for my bed. And I'm going to really dig deep because we are a blessed group of people. And we need to be more acknowledging of that in our lives. And I believe that as you list it, and as you look through that over time, that envy beast inside of you will start to quiet because you will be content. You can learn to be satisfied, just like Paul. Whatever the season of life you happen to find yourself in now, you can be satisfied. You can be content. And then what are you going to do with all that time you have left over? Because you're not searching after all those other things anymore, right? Maybe we can start participating in other people's lives. Maybe we can go help that person with the big earrings do something that they need to do. Maybe we can participate in being God's hands and feet when we stop being so worried about what it is we don't have right now. Because the truth is, we have enough. Let's pray.